for after Mr. Tim Foxley's presentation, we'll go over to Dr. Paul Stott, who, as I said, is an EFSAS Research Fellow and a writer and academic, and is specifically focusing on British jihadism and its connections with South Asia. And he will talk about the British ISIS connections with South Asia and also the local terrorist groups' turf war in South Asia. So, Mr. Stott, you have the floor.
Okay, good afternoon, everyone. Thank you again to Junaid and his team for being able to organise this event in somewhat trying times. Now, I don't know if I'm as clever as Tim in terms of being able to share my screen. Let me see if that gives you, does that give you my PowerPoint slides?
Yeah, maybe it's good to do it full size.
Yep. Okay.
That's good.
That's good, lovely. So I'm going to talk about what I see as a sort of jihadist triangle, which has three different points of the triangle: the territory Islamic State held in Syria and Iraq, the UK, and then South Asia, with a particular focus on Pakistan. In terms of the outline, I'm going to talk a little bit about some of the factors which are present where a terrorist group develops some momentum, has a degree of success, talk about how that particularly applies and applied with regards to Islamic State, look at the British end and the appeal of al-Baghdadi and others to some young Britons, and look at three particular case studies which rather illustrate my my triangle metaphor, and then really finish off with some questions of where things might go in the near future. Okay, what allows a terrorist group to prosper? Well, I've put forward the view there are both internal and external factors which are likely to be present. An organization needs a clear, coherent ideology and a leadership to disseminate that ideology. And I think Islamic State, certainly for a period, enjoyed that. There also needs to be the group dynamics to take an organization forward, and from there to develop momentum. And in the period 2013, 2014, that was most certainly prevalent. In time, the organization, I would argue, bit off a bit more than it could chew. External factors may arguably play a much greater role, and it's interesting within terrorism studies how little we talk about the concept of luck. I'm not sure if I've ever seen an academic article on the importance of luck, but just in my slide there's a little extract from the 9/11 Commission report, which reminds us that if you look at some of the, if you look at the German end of 9/11, the Hamburg cell, these were people under Mohammed Atta who had originally intended to leave Germany to fight jihad in Chechnya against the Russians, but met somebody on a train who encouraged them to go to Afghanistan instead. And on such small little factors may history turn. Particularly important now, I would argue, in the rise of Islamic State was its large potential recruitment pool. That you've got an organization here that seeks to appeal to all Sunni Muslims globally. And what that means, because you've got such a potentially wide base, is even if a small, very small percentage of people rally to that cause, numerically, you may well have quite a decent sized organization. They're not looking to radicalize a particularly small group of people, such as animal rights activists or far right activists in one single country. They're looking to appeal globally. And part of doing that is, of course, articulating particular grievances and senses of injustice, whether actual or exaggerated. Now, any discussion on events in South Asia has to, I think, consider the importance of ungoverned or poorly governed spaces. And historically, we have examples, obviously, from within Afghanistan and Pakistan. And these are often the areas where terrorist groups have been able to operate, to develop a base of support, and or to operate without state interference. Just this week, the UN World Food Programme has drawn attention to a particular area of Mozambique, where Islamic State fighters are allegedly in the field, and over 300,000 people are displaced, with problems of malnutrition following. Further aspect, certainly in the rise of Islamic State in the Middle East, was at least one nation state turning a blind eye. And I draw attention here to Turkey and Turkish government strategy, obviously, focus on the Kurds as the primary enemy, focus on getting rid of Assad as leader of Syria, so Islamic State were the lesser of those evils, if you like. And what that meant was, for quite a period, Islamic State had a degree of strategic depth. They knew their northern border was secure from attack, and indeed that some of their fighters would be able to, potential fighters, new recruits, would be able to cross it. Returning to the Indian subcontinent, the issue of state support for terrorist groups has historically been a factor in the region. So Pakistani support for Al-Qaeda, for the Afghan Taliban, and people will have seen in the Sunday Guardian and other papers some of the revelations around former Taliban fighter Ehsan, which was I think in the Sunday Guardian earlier this month. Importance also with a group like IS has been its international appeal towards jihadists already in the field, those who are in existing armed groups, and who, something we saw very particularly with Al-Qaeda after 9/11, where you see some of the North African groups pledging allegiance to bin Laden, joining an organization which has a degree of momentum, and the opportunity to, if you like, pledge allegiance to a new organization that is doing well, that is having success, or indeed to simply join an organization to leave one where you're in dispute or bad odor with others, certainly exist. Abdul Basit, in a 2017 article on Islamic State in this region, found a total of 6 organizations that had either pledged allegiance to IS or who had working relations with it. And I think what's to be noted there as well is, of course, the peculiar situation with the Taliban for many years, where Mullah Omar was dead, but they were pretending he wasn't. Actually made it easier for people who pledged allegiance to the Taliban via Mullah Omar to pledge allegiance to somebody else. You know, they've been let down, they've been flannelled for too long. So al-Baghdadi here, in his 2014 declaration of himself as caliph, this is perhaps with hindsight a sort of peak moment in the organisation's rise, followed by its dramatic fall. But what's worth stressing here is the specific strategy, where in effect the starting point of their operations, the base that they have, is the declaration of a caliphate, which Muslims should come and join. And this, if you like, is the opposite approach of some of the religious political parties and organisations that people will be aware of, Muslim Brotherhood or Jamaat Islami, where there's talk of Islamic State, you know, along the road when we've done the right preparatory work, and indeed a different approach to that of Al-Qaeda. And the Islamic State English language magazine, Dabiq, really saw this as dividing the world into 2 camps. Come and experience actually existing Sharia, and if you don't, you're against us, if you like. The typical message, if you like, of extremist organisations. Now, as Tim mentioned in his presentation, there was also a very ambitious territorial sweep with Islamic State. And you have here this idea of sort of non-contiguous Islamic State, where territory that's either held by IS fighters or that Islamic State fighters intend to hold in the future is claimed as part of the overall territory. To actually have the same slide there as we just saw, this is from 2014 and shows you certainly the scale of the ambitions, but we might also argue the scale of the delusions that we're here we are 6 years on. This is how they envisage things looking now, and of that potential territory, none of it really is held today by Islamic State. And certainly if you consider what they refer to as Andalus, Spain and Portugal, you know, they weren't even close to doing so. This message, as I said, did have some appeal to a minority of British Sunni Muslims. Around about 800 to 1,000 travelled to the Middle East, and certainly several hundred were also prevented from travelling to join them. By 2015, at least 50 children were wards of court so as to stop their parents taking them. It's worth stressing, though, that the rise of Islamic State in Iraq and Syria did not stop British jihadis travelling to other theatres of conflict. So people were still appearing in Somalia, Kenya, Afghanistan, Pakistan, etc., etc. And we also had in Al-Muhajiroun group, which has gone through a whole series of different names, but most people will be familiar with Anjem Choudary and some of those around him. We had an organisation which had originally been sympathetic towards Al-Qaeda and was able to shift to Islamic State without too much difficulty. How does this play out in practice? Well, the final section of my presentation looks at 3 examples, 3 points, if you like, on this triangle, taking in Britain, Syria, and the Indian subcontinent. And the first of these is a man from Manchester, Mohammed Aftab Suleman, dual national, and in a way quite a standard set of examples, really, in terms of his conduct. Somebody who travels to Syria in 2013 with a charity. But what's slightly different here is he leaves Syria, heads to Islamabad, and in Pakistan was producing social media material, extremist publications for dissemination. He then returns to the UK in 2014. Within a month or so, is arrested, and again, not untypically, his family proclaim his innocence in the Manchester Evening News. You know, he's a good lad, Mohammed, and he then pleads guilty to 5 terrorist offences, jailed for 5 years and 3 months. It's a sign, I think, of the struggle that social media companies have in that they not only didn't seem to have addressed this material at the time, but when I recently checked his YouTube account, it was still live, including videos on there which had been part of the court case in which he was found guilty. So there's a problem there for these big multinational internet companies. Dr. Mirza Tariq Ali is a slightly different case. He's somebody who came from Pakistan to the UK to work in the National Health Service, where he was a doctor. He joined the Al-Muhajiroun group, was present on their street protests in London, and fled a court case in London in 2013, where he was accused of a sectarian attack on a Shia man in Edgware Road, which is one of the large Arab area in London. Interestingly with him, though, he doesn't take the route which other members of Al-Muhajiroun did of going to Syria. he returns to Pakistan, where he appears in one of the Pakistan Taliban factions, and again appears on their social media, calling for others to come and join him. Within a few months, he's killed by the Pakistani military. But I really flag this up as an example because I think there's some arguments in the UK and internationally that, you know, if we just address the Syrian conflict, you know, if there's some form of peace agreement or the defeat of Islamic State there, this is a major victory. This will sweep away many of the problems we have with regards to radicalization and terrorism. Well, this case rather shows that's a rather simplistic approach. And equally, in terms of Islamic State themselves as an actor, Dr. Mirza had been a member of an organisation in the UK which was supportive of Islamic State, but the faction that he hooks up with in Pakistan at the time is one that's described by Abdul Basit as fence-sitting as to whether it supports Islamic State or not. So you know, there's a degree of space allowed in these organisations. My final case study, Hamayun Tariq from Dudley, was a car mechanic in the UK, and he's somebody who, if you like, is on the same triangle but following a different route. He leaves Britain in 2012, but goes to Waziristan, where he's fighting for 2 years before going to join Islamic State when the organisation's, if you like, at its peak. He again utilises social media, was on Twitter in English for a period, claiming to be involved in Islamic State's bomb production. And when Theresa May, the then British Home Secretary, revoked his British citizenship, he went online to thank her. The trail from there seems to go rather cold. So I've not established whether this man's dead, whether he's alive, whether he's in custody of the Kurds, or if he's left the Syrian theatre for another conflict. So that really takes us into one of the British responses to the rise of Islamic State, and indeed before that Al-Qaeda, which has been to revoke the citizenship of dual nationals. So most people will be familiar with the case of Shamima Begum, which had, I think, international press coverage. Young woman who'd left the UK for Islamic State and was of Bangladeshi parentage, but a British citizen. And that really renewed attention on this policy. We know that by 2017, up to 150 British passports had been revoked. We do not have an up-to-date figure because the British Home Office is reluctant to disseminate it. Now, it's unclear how many of those stripped of their UK passports have passports for a country in South Asia. I would expect it to be a sizable number, which obviously raises the questions of where these individuals, where still alive, will go to next. Now, just to finish off and return perhaps to some of the points that I was making in terms of, you know, what gives a terrorist organization momentum, what might allow it to prosper. Certainly that momentum for Islamic State, its USP of having established a caliphate, that has been lost. The loss of its territory does weaken the group's reputation. It needs to sort of repackage and reevaluate itself. And similarly with Al-Muhajiroun, perhaps the most important British jihadist group, many of its members have either been killed fighting in Iraq or Syria, have been imprisoned and extremely well known in the UK to the security services. So again, there's a sort of interregnum with regards to that group. Now, obviously, we've gone through the COVID-19 crisis, and it raises some interesting questions with regards to the recruitment to terrorist organisations. I've never really been particularly taken on the idea that people largely or primarily radicalized online. I think that's part of the process, but you know, people tend to join jihadist organizations, certainly from the UK, as groups of mates, and people go with their associates, with friends. The process of certainly meetings and travel has been hugely disrupted in recent months. So if you like, there's an interesting case study here for those who argue that online radicalization or self-radicalization are predominant. We may well see that tested in the coming weeks and months. But certainly some factors which allowed for the rise of Islamic State, this big potential recruitment pool, issues around grievance, sense of injustice, those types of issues still remain, and indeed are very difficult to address in the short term. Thank you.